Hi, this is Rick Harsh, author and chief editor of Corona Samizdat Books. One thing I try not to do here is favor my own books. It's pretty easy to accomplish that feat. Um, that restraint is very easy because I'm not actually restraining myself. I'm talking about books that I like a lot, that I really believe in, some of which all of you know about. Um, Most recent of which was my reread of. Let me just start this. This is this is part 4, by the way, of my series, um, Literature and War, and I just had the itch. I think I might have mentioned it here or somewhere else. I don't know. Maybe I mentioned it down at the bar. I'm trying to keep my hair out of my eyes, for fuck's sake. We're working on this movie, and I can't change my looks too much. It's been over a year and a half, and the minute the movie is completely done with shooting, and right now we're nearing the post-production phase, but that means we'll be doing little shots to fix this or that, and I can't do anything. As soon as it's done, completely done, no more shooting, I am gonna cut my hair short. I'm gonna shave most of my face, and I'm gonna, grow some pubic hair, and I'm gonna go out and enjoy the world as a different looking human. Well, anyway, as I said somewhere, I'm rereading Bill Clark's uh, double uh, 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 novella, which is called a novella, even though Dr. Ed's book, the first one, it's actually called Skinner Boxed, which is uh, clever until you read the book, and then it's very funny, um, and still clever because it is about mental health, and it's about a few days in the life of Dr. Ed. And by the time you get to the end, you'll be saying, "Oh shit, I should have paid more attention to that one name." Hint, but not spoiler. Um, and I do have some questions for the author, but he generated a great deal of interest in some phenomena, and I'd like to know more about it. Um, and it's followed. This is oh, by the way, it's uh 335 pages, which is a novella. I'm wondering, why he called it a novella. Why did you call this a novella, Bill? If I may call you Bill, he goes by WD. Um, well, I don't know, but it's pretty funny. The next book then is Love's Alchemy, and this is I understand why this is called a novella. It's more or less a series of interwoven short stories with an end that requires a lot of thought, and invites a reread. I don't know why I didn't reread it right away, because the only reason I'm not rereading it now, I did just read it, but I'm not rereading it now because I really want to get to Alejo Carpentier, the great Cuban writer, and his book that's called Explosion in the Cathedral. And so I've just started that. I read at least 3 pages last night before I fell asleep, not because of the book, but because I was fucking tired. Um, so that's let's call that the prelude, and in which I'm demonstrating that I don't just talk about my books. I don't know why I marked this down to 15 euros, but it is only 15 euros. It's the most pocketbook like of our big books, and I'm not sure what makes it that way. This one is close. I mean, they just feel so good. And this one, maybe because it's got a little more flap. I don't know, but there's something about it. Anyway, lovely book. Thank you, Bill. And uh, the hell with the people who don't want to read it. Sorry, I lost my temper. Now, because I'm speaking about literature and war, I'm now going to speak about my own books, which I know more about in terms of what they mean and what I want to say and why there's war in them. And so that's why I'm going to go right to the dirtiest, muckiest, murkiest book that has war in it. It's called Walk Like a Duck, a season of Little League Baseball in Italy. Now, I think probably what I should do is make a little bit of a map here. Italy, as you know, is kind of boot-shaped. The Adriatic Sea is slanted so that Athens is actually in Eastern Europe. Okay. And then, okay. Here's your map of Italy. You see that? The boot and all that. I am going to now look on the fucking pen. Okay, you look on the coastline here of this is the Adriatic Sea. There are lots of islands there, but what I bothered to put in is Istria, which is where I live. Now I'm going to put a dot there, but not where I live. Rather, about 20-minute drive from where I live if I want to get to the actual dot. That's Trieste. Over on the other side, you got Genoa and Cinque Terre and Pisa and Livorno and all of that. So now I've just drawn that armpit. So there are two armpits. Now, the rise of fascism happened mostly near. I'll kind of do my rise of fascism line. Okay, now we've got that little line there. Within that territory, you have the rise of fascism. It covers Venezia. I'll put Venezia in so that you'll see. Whoops, nope. Shit, that's not right. I'll put Venezia. Nah, okay, I'm going to change the line. And I know what I'll do. I'll color it in. And then you'll have the space wherein fascism rose. And you'll see it goes beyond Venezia to a low, well, you don't see that it's low, but a lowland that's marshy and so on. And you got the city of Ferrara there. Ferrara is very much on the tip of this. Bologna is a little bit further down. And one of the great fascist stories is of Italo Balbo's fascists rushing to Bologna after Rome had sent a special prosecutor who had destroyed the mafia temporarily in the early 20s and had been sent to Bologna to start dealing with all these roving fascist gangs. And in the lowlands around the hinterland beyond Venice. Venice is very lowland, but this is lowland too. I forgot the Italian word for it. What they did, the Ferrara fascists rushed from where are we here? Here down to Bologna and laid siege to the town where this special prosecutor, think James Comey, only taller or shorter, it doesn't matter because it's only one guy against, tens of thousands of fascists who besieged the town. The government had troops there, and there was a tense standoff. What are we going to do? They don't want this investigation to go on, and they don't want anything to come of it. They're not ready to fight the government, or are they? A lot of hotheads amongst those early fascists. And now this is 2 years before Mussolini's waltz on Rome, and what Italo Balbo was in charge, and what he decided was, well, what's the best way to diffuse this situation? We'll aggravate it, but by insult and not injury. And so he had his men, one by one, go up to the municipal building, locked, where our fearless prosecutor was cowering, and each one had to whip out their cock and piss on the door. So he had everybody, all these fascists. I mean, it's fascist humor. They all went up and they pissed on the door. I'd like to imagine. I'd like to have more specific reports. Like how many people actually did it. What was the street like? I mean, that's a lot of urine. I mean, if 40 people did it, it's a lot of urine. And he had at his disposal, I think, 30,000 people. The Ferrara Fascisti. Well, okay. So now you're getting a little idea of the locale, but over here within this area here, you had a lot of Slovenes. There was a lot that doesn't make the history books outside of Slovenia about what happened to the Slovenes before the territory was actually taken over. So it just said charge your phone. Wonder if I can do that. Let's go over here and uh-oh. Okay, we're charging the phone because we don't want to start this over, do we? Okay, and I'll put this here, and no, that won't work. I could try to put it down here. That looks like it might work. If I didn't drop my phone, that's for sure. Okay, so the area that I'm talking about here is largely Friuli, it was called. And it was split between Slovenes and Italians who, like your 19th century Palestinians and Israelis, they didn't bother much with each other. They got along, they worked together when they had to, they had their own places, and they behaved somewhat differently, like with language. Slovenes spoke Slovene and Italian. Italians spoke Italian and Italian. And it was pretty peaceful. But the fascists, they burned down in Trieste. They burned down the Slovene National Home, which was the main cultural organization in the city of Trieste. And that was a pretty big deal. Not a very nice thing for them to do. And the result is that when you live in Slovenia near the border of Trieste and you want your child to have a good baseball life, you start driving him to Italy, where they have a really good baseball organization in this area. From just above Trieste to Monfalcone, which is about 45 minutes away, a town where recently the mayor has made several legislative moves against Bangladeshis because there's a very large shipbuilding plant there, and there's a lot of Bangladeshis working at it, and they are well, I don't know all of the legislation. I've just heard about this recently, but there's a lot of good grocery stores there for people like me who like hot peppers and Indian food. But the thing is, when you take your son there, you know, all between here and or between Trieste and Venezia, there are baseball fields all over the place. The U.S. Military was around and built a lot of them, and then it became something, not specific only to this area because the U.S. was all over the country, but when you visit this area, you see all these fascist shrines, and and so it's impossible to write a book like this, which, by the way, is 640. Is it that long? Shit, 646 pages. Yeah. Um, there's a lot about fascism in here, and a lot of it's very funny. I mean, the Isonzo front is actually the Socha fronta, the Socha River in Slovene, Isonzo in Italian. Now, that's where Hemingway wrote about, his classy prose about the little town with the little steeple. That town was Karlsruhe in Austrian, Caporetto in Italian, and Kobarid in Slovene. And from here you can see the mountain that is above it, where was one of the worst places to be engaged in trench warfare. But it's legendary. There's a museum there and everything. And in the winter, the two sides in the war, primarily Italians versus more or less primarily Austrians. I don't know. They had Bosnians, and they had all kinds of people. They had Germans at the end. That's what tipped the scales, perhaps. Anyway, during the winter, they would exchange things. Like, you guys have bread? Yeah, okay. Well, we got wine. And so it was cozy. It was cozy, fucking cold, but cozy. I mean, when you look at that mountain from here, rising above the Adriatic Sea, it's amazing. You can't believe that there was trench warfare up there, and then throughout, so there World War One was the biggest thing. One of our fields was at a place called Redipulia, and from the side of the field that the visitors were on, we were visitors there at Redipulia. When my son's team played, I had a view across the field, across some open area, across a small 2-lane highway, to the most hilarious monument from World War One. I believe it was built in the 30s. Mussolini had it built, and that it was a place. I think it was called Monte Michele, and this was a mountain that the Italians were always trying to take. It was a small mountain, a hill. It was really a hill, and but it was steep. And if you go there and you want a tour, they'll show you the iron-wheeled bicycles and so on, and you can read all about the slaughter and people trying to get up the hill, and with guns and trying to shoot someone after they get up the hill, trying to take the hill. That seems to be that, a lot of people could sum up war in that way. We got to take that hill. We got to get that hill. Well, the Italians tried for a long time and eventually did get that hill. But what did they do for a monument? What do you do for a monument? Well, they took an extraordinary amount of cement, and they built steps, very wide steps that go up, and then there's a little platform kind of, and then more steps, and goes way up to the top of the hill where they have the cavalry. I don't know why. I mean, the Jesus bullshit, up on the top there, and that's what you climb up to, and what always struck me about that was that anybody who lost their leg, say, grandpa, by the 30s, he's grandpa. You're driving. Hey, grandpa, there's a new monument to you guys who fought there. And you're driving along, and you go, and okay, let's look at the monument. And what is it? What does grandpa see? Fucking steps. And you know what he's thinking? Well, it's a little late now. It's a little fucking late to have steps there, And of course, I discussed that in this book. I also have a little bit to say about the famous lighthouse in Trieste called Faro del Libertad, or no, Faro del, maybe it is Faro del Libertad, but the Lighthouse of Victory is what it's called. I call it Cazzo di Cadorna, which is cock of Cadorna, General Cadorna, who's responsible for hundreds of thousands dying through his asinine decisions and directives and so on, and well, I was wondering, it was probably 1923 when Mussolini had that put up. I think it was the early 20s. Maybe it was after he was in power, so 24, 25. But what victory was he talking about? The most famous part of the story of the Socha Front is that in the 12th and final offensive, the Germans kicked the shit out of them and drove them almost back to Venice before the Allies, the British and U.S. allies, bucked them up and held off at the Piave River. They held off the German Austrian axis or nexus. I don't know, depending on what you want to call it. Anyway, so this is and also I should add that if you were to mingle with the populace in various big cities throughout Italy, you would find more fascists in Trieste than anywhere else. So I was I knew middle class fathers and working class fathers. The working class is, they're the working class, and so they're nice, and they offer beers and stuff. And the middle class are the middle class, so they're tight assed, and they more of them speak English, but they don't swear unless they think you can't hear or you're not looking at them. It's really funny because Italians swear not as much as Slavs, but maybe more. I don't know. They do swear a lot. I've learned a lot. Non mi rompere le balle. Don't play with my balls. Vaffanculo is from vare fanculo un fanculo vare fa culo, something about your asshole. Pezzo di merda, tocca di merda, depends on where you are. Pizzi merda, it's all the same. It's piece of shit. The best one, though, the best version of that is from Napoli, where it's omi merd, man of shit, which I think is a much more powerful way of putting it. Point being that I was surrounded by fascism, vestiges of fascism, parents who were fascists at heart, but had nothing to do with it other than become baseball fathers. And I don't make any connection in the book between I didn't go into this in depth, but certainly there's something to do with parental behavior at baseball games and amongst umpires, and fascism. It has to be so. Anyway, so my most Pacific book, and even, let me just read to you from this book a very, very short piece. And from the prologue, the first sentence is, "This is a happy book written by a happy man. And yet, how could I avoid writing about war? War poisons everything in the environment and in the socio-cultural region. There is still a lot of propaganda against Slovenes who were victims of fascists. When the fascists took over this area of Slovenia, there was no speaking Slovene. So that book, let's put that down for a second and go to one that's a little simpler to talk about and so a little quicker. This is nonfiction, like that, but that's a diary about baseball, and this is a circumnavigation through maritime history. So this is about maritime history, and so you get chapters like, well, the first thing I started it in India, and the reason for that is that the trade in India preceded the maritime trade around the Indian subcontinent preceded that in the Mediterranean. So I didn't want this to be just another book that starts in the Mediterranean. And so I had read a lot about Indian maritime stuff. And already you get to war, because you get Vasco da Gama's incredibly savage second trip to India. It reads like it reads a lot like Israelis in Gaza, although on the scale is a little bit different. Anyway, that's chapter 1, India. Chapter 2 is encounters, where I'm talking about early encounters amongst different people like Europeans and Hawaiians and so on. And so war comes up a little bit there, I mean, people take over places, if you haven't noticed. And 3 is naval battles. So there I'm really getting into the war, talking about famous battles in history. And chapter 4 is piracy, which also is a form of war. And I talk about the Phoenicians at one point, and that brings up war. So, I mean, you can't write about it. About maritime history without covering war. The same Vasco da Gama nightmare is mentioned here in a book about colonialism, a short book about colonialism. I would call this something like a short novel. Bill Clark would call it 5 novellas, but it's only 67 pages. It's precisely what I wanted. I'm very pleased with this book. And the only war that is discussed in detail is the Vasco da Gama attack on Indians. And it's some of the ugliest stuff you'll ever find in history. And we got the Balkan flip. You see how that works? Okay. Adriatica Deserta. Now this book is about the idea of hegemony and how it gets passed around like a virus. But I wrote this at the very beginning of the war against Afghanistan. Luckily, I decided to just mention it in passing in a way, one of the characters is an Afghan, a Muslim in from Bosnia who makes it to the coast to Zadar, Croatia, where this takes place, and and he's not a warlike person, and so his presence there is an adjunct to the war, but it is not a warlike presence. But there is discussion of warlike events in South America and so on, and there is the theme, which is quietly very much about war. And the other side, we have Kramberger with Monkey. And this is all about assassinations. It's a comedy of assassinations. It even goes back to a war in the 1500s, dukes of Austria going after a ne'er-do-well renegade in a fascinating cave atop a cliff, and inside which they built a castle, and and that actually has a way up to the turf above. The troops, actually, they were sent from Trieste, which was an Austrian territory at the time. They sent this guy's troops to get this guy, and his name was Erasm. Erasm, and Erasm was kind of a Robin Hood type and kind of a smartass. And it's a fantastic place to visit if you're ever in Slovenia. There's this famous cave called Postojna, and it's awful. There's a train that takes you inside, and you can just drive 9 kilometers above that and behind it and find Erasmus Castle, and it's a much more fascinating story and much more magnificent place to look at. And anyway, so Erasmus was he was a good guerrilla fighter. He was a woodsman and all that stuff, and he had all these people trying to assail his unassailable stronghold. And what happened was the Triestini, the Austrians from Trieste, were running out of food. Well, Erasmus had plenty of wild game, and he would send down food for the the soldiers besieging him. And famous story, and apparently true in Slovene history. One thing you want to do when you have a bunch of soldiers in a castle, and the way up to the and out of the castle, I don't think was easy. And so it wasn't like, everybody was coming and going. There was some coming and going, and, dragging big, big beasts like wild pigs, maybe bear, that they killed, and, so everybody can eat. Well, when you have a lot of people in a relatively small cave space with the castle's front, and it's 1484, I believe, was the year that this happened. You don't have flush toilets, and even if you did, you don't have latrines. Pissing is probably not much of a problem, although I don't know if there was a place inside the castle where I would have been comfortable standing on a precipice and pissing down. But you want to keep the toilet separate, and they found out the Austrians found out that the toilet was separate, and so they got a spy in amongst Erasmus's people who put a little flag in a window or something, probably a little flag, I don't know, but in some way let them know when Erasmus was on the shitter, and a cannonball hit the thing, and that was the first political assassination in Slovenia. And so every assassination in this book surrounds war in one way or another, sometimes sort of a shadow civil war. But there's yet another book about war and why it has to be that way. Now, this is the assassination of Olof Palme, which occurred without a war. In fact, we don't know why it happened, and we don't know who did it. They say they know, but I don't believe them. Not because I'm conspiratorial minded, but because I read a lot about the case before the Swedes decided, let's just say this guy did it. That guy, never made sense. And I've read about that guy extensively because whenever you write about him, this guy comes up, but not as a suspect, as a witness. And now they're saying he did it. And to make a long story short, which this video is going to need some brevity, I don't think that guy did it. But nonetheless, no war was involved, except the Cold War, perhaps. We really don't know. But this book was written largely about something that European citizens who read, European historians, people in Europe know all about it. And the U.S. seems to know very little about it. I found nothing from the United States about this. It's viewed probably, if you come across it on YouTube, there's a fantastic documentary, 2.5 hours long, called Gladio. Gladio was the Italian name for this phenomenon. What was the phenomenon? The phenomenon was a secret NATO cell that involved the CIA, British Secret Service, and it was a bunch of cells. And what their goal was, they say, I don't know about this, but was modeled on the French resistance. If the Soviets ever decided to take over Western Europe, there would be an army already in place, a resistance army already in place. They had weapons caches and so on. And part of the controversy about this was the U.S. during World War II and towards the end, of course, but they swept up and rehabilitated, so to speak, a lot of Nazis in both Italy and Germany. In Italy, these Nazis became the Christian Democrat Party, and in Germany, they just became real helpful. And each country had one of these stay-at-home armies, they're called. Even Norway. What did the Norwegian stay-at-home army do? It's kind of vague about the dates that this started, but a lot of the activities that they picked up began in 1948 when in Italy the Christian Democrat Party, the previous fascist party, was defeating the communists in the 1948 election, which frightened the United States because the communists were really, really popular. And, the fascists had just lost, and there wasn't a median party, so they created the Christian Democrats, and the CIA pulled out all the tricks and lots of money to support the neo-fascist party. And what that led to in Italy was decades of class warfare. And I would call this war. The most famous period was from the late 60s to the early 80s, the Anni di Piombo, the years of lead, and they're called. And there were a lot of atrocities, the most famous of which, Dario Fo, a Nobel Prize winning, I'm running out of gas, a Nobel Prize winning playwright, wrote The Accidental Death of an Anarchist. That anarchist's name was Pino Pinelli, Giuseppe Pinelli. He was an anarchist, and when a bank in Milano was blown up, and I don't know how many people died, not more than 20. I think it was 9 or 11, but it doesn't matter. A bunch of people died, and then it was a terror bombing, and they rounded up all the anarchists, and Pinelli fell out of a fourth floor window. They said that was the police version. It was December. There's a great song about it that begins. It's in December. It works better in Italian, but it's cold. It's cold. Or no, hot. Caldo. In Dicembre in Milano, it's cold, hot. It's hot, so you got to have the window open. That's how it translates. I'm sorry I can't sing it for you. Or maybe I'm not sorry. Maybe you'd be sorry if I did. But the point is, it's a legendary thing. People know the song. And what really happened was a bomb, the bomb that was set off by the right wing. And the curious thing is that they had an explosive that was very hard to get. NATO had it, and it can now be traced. You cannot trace it back to find the actual American-based person within the Gladio network in his cell. You cannot find out who that is. As far as I know, there's no way to do that. Maybe, they were very secretive, and they were very successful at being secretive. And so you can find out that it was C4, the explosive, and you can find out the name. It's in this book somewhere. I can't remember the name. DiGilio, maybe. I'm not sure. But you can find out who brought the explosive to Milano. And, that much study has been put into this, particularly by prosecutors, one from Venice, who really, unavoidable, blew the whole thing up. And anyway, so fascists blow up a bank. Anarchists are arrested. One of them is shoved out a window by the cops. Famous story. Many things happened during that 15 years or so. Equally detestable. Aldo Moro was killed. The Bologna bombing, and so on. And intricately involved in all of it was this network of U.S. and, by the end, mostly U.S., but homegrown fascists in places like Belgium and Luxembourg and Norway and Spain. Of course, they had Franco, so it wasn't hard. Portugal had Salazar, so it wasn't hard. But there were lots of, it was hard to keep secrets. In a very believable way. This came out in 1991. The prime minister, no radical him, Andreotti was his name. He actually, in Parliament, he admitted the existence of the Gladio conspiracy. And, just to give you an idea of how crazy this all was, there's an instance on record proven of British and U.S. Gladio members pulling an exercise in their own territory of Belgium. I mean, their comrades, without telling the Belgian Gladio private army or anybody in it what they were going to do. There was a place called Vielsalm that had a weapons depot very near the Luxembourg border, and so they parachuted into Belgium near that border, went over to Luxembourg, and got a guide from the Luxembourg Gladio network, and they had him take them to the weapons depot, and then they told him, okay, bugger off, and they actually attacked the weapons depot just to see if they could. They killed one person, they injured another, and they stole a bunch of weapons, and that was just what they did. They did shit like that. We don't know how much. They one time to test their Western Europe-wide network, Central and Western Europe-wide network, they landed a person with no papers on the Norwegian coast. And he was supposed to be ushered down to Friuli, this region right near here, and to see if they could do it. He had to have guides, there had to be communication across borders, and whatever papers were required would be gotten for him, and or not. And he actually made it. It took about a month, but he made it all the way down here, not too many kilometers from here. There was also in amongst the baseball area, there was a famous Gladio case, or actually I'm not sure. Gladio was responsible for the bomb itself, but a Carabinieri group was called about a suspicious vehicle right on the Isonzo River, and pretty close to here, a place we'd go by all the time. And when they checked out this bullet-ridden, as it turned out, vehicle, it blew up, killed 3 of them. And the same people who did that also, shortly after that, tried to hijack a plane from the Trieste airport, which is actually in a place called Ronchi dei Legionari, which is named after the Legion of decline. Named after the Legion of D'Annunzio's troops, who gathered there to march on Rijeka, or Fiume, as it was called at the time. This is, fascist highlights everywhere. Those same troops slaughtered a bunch of children in the next town over from here. There's a little monument there. And so this book is largely about Gladio, but also Cold War shenanigans, like the time that Moe Berg, former baseball player, was sent to kill Heisenberg, Werner Heisenberg, in case Heisenberg, who was giving a lecture in Zurich, in case Heisenberg talked about the bomb, and in such a way that implied that the Germans were leading or were getting the bomb. He talked about something else, as it turned out, and Moe Berg had a pistol, but didn't use it. And so there's a lot of, basically the crazier this book gets, the more likely it is to be true. So it's a novel, and it's a novel written by me and et al. Et al. Is a bunch of people, listed here, and I just, would give people assignments. I need someone to write this, I need someone to write that, and then I would alter it to fit to whatever degree I had to. And there's also 2 narrators named Rick Harsh in here, because I need to use myself, my fictional self, in perilous cases. But anyway, there's a lot of exotic stuff in here, and it's all fucking true. Now, luckily, I can shorten this a little bit. I got one more book here. It's got lots about war in it, but we don't sell it anymore. It's called The Manifold Destiny of Eddie Vegas. It was bought by Zero Gram Press, and it's I would guess several people have told me well, 3 people have told me that it's the best book they ever read. Many others have said, well, nobody said anything bad about it, so I don't know why I'm not rich yet. But there's a lot about war in here, as there are 2 strands to the book. One is a historical strand that goes from the days of the mountain men and to the days of nuclear testing in Nevada. And there's another strand that takes place in Belgium, and in connection with someone who that strand over in Nevada leads up to. And, well, we get Blackwater, a Blackwater knockoff called Blackguard, and stories about Vietnam, people who were, one person who was at Dien Bien Phu gives a lot of first person talk about that. And we have a cab driver historian, a woman based on one of my ancestors, who has a great deal to say about war, and a Native American. And here they're called Injuns because that's how the mountain men talked. We have a lot of other language quirks in here because of the way the mountain men talk. But she talks about the vision of various slaughters visited by the white man upon Indians. So you have those wars, and you have a little bit of Iraq, and well, you even have a bit in Yemen that's an anti-terrorist op. And anyway, I'm trying to describe the United States. I had in my mind something like what Mario Vargas Llosa starts conversation in the cathedral with. At what precise moment did Peru fuck itself up? Or something quite like that. And I thought, let me write a novel about how the U.S. got fucked up. And so this is my attempt to explain that, and that can't be done without a lot about war, as you well know. So this is my personal literature and war segment. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you liked it enough to return to it after falling asleep, or taking breaks. I know it's long. I don't care. And I love you all. I would be nowhere without any of you. In fact, without any of you, I'd be fucking alone. Suleiman, Preeti Sam, Suleiman, Preeti Sam. You've got to see my dog. Suleiman, Preeti Sam, I'll be right back. Suleiman. We don't know which of us is older. I'm almost 65, and he's 15. Look into the camera. Yeah, look at the foggy eyes. And he's such a sweetheart. I love my dog. Actually, there's no one here, and I have no idea when anyone will be home. My children have moved out. My wife comes home late from work every night, goes in early. I'm all alone. There's not for Suleiman. I unashamedly kiss my dog in the face. Goodbye. Thank you.